I listen to my wife better if we were rigged up like this. Do you think that would be it?
That might be. All right, let me make sure it's recording. Check.
Everything good?
I think so.
All right.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Common Life, a podcast from South Highland Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, Alabama. My name is Cort Gatliff, and I'm the senior pastor here at South Highland. And I am joined today by a longtime friend of this congregation, Reverend Jim Truesdell. Jim was an associate pastor here a few years back. He has been working for a missions organization, and now he is transitioning to a new call where he will be the senior pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Athens, Alabama. And so I brought him on to talk a little bit about his journey and how to navigate transitions faithfully as a follower of Jesus. One thing to note is that there is no video on this episode because we are trying a new in-person recording setup. So Jim came down to my office and joined me at the church for this conversation. Hope you enjoy. Jim Truesdell, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
It's good to have you on. Most of our listeners will know who you are, but for those who don't, give us some background. Who are you? What are you up to? What is your connection to South Highland?
Yeah, gosh. Dad, husband. Sonia and I have been married for 28 years coming up this next year. We have two children. We have a son, William, that died shortly after he was born. And then we have a daughter, Emma, who's a sophomore at Auburn. I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but became a follower of Jesus when I was a senior in high school. A lot of that was through the ministry of Young Life, and really discipled in some beautiful ways those early, really 9 months before I went to college.
I didn't know you were a Young Life kid.
Yeah. It was a really weird Young Life. I think Young Life in the South is a little different than it was up north. Just kind of crazy. It was just a wild mix of people. All sorts of different types of people were involved. And that really resonated with my family because it's a I'm the oldest of 8 children. So we have African Americans. I have African American siblings, a sister from India, a sister from Korea, 2 siblings from South America. So that experience in Young Life kind of connected with where I was in my own personal life.
Jim, we've been rolling for like 2 minutes and I've just learned more about you than our several years of friendship together. I didn't realize you had 7 siblings.
Yeah.
Crazy.
We put the fun in dysfunction now. Let me tell you, that's been one of the fun things about this season of transition for me is kind of unearthing new dimensions of both hurt and healing that are necessary for really thoughtful and good transition. So that's part of my story. Yeah, called to ministry pretty quickly that spring. I was not getting into any universities at all. This little Christian college, similar to Samford, gave me an opportunity to come. But
where was that?
Houghton College.
Is that in New York?
Yeah, that's in New York. About an hour and a half south of Rochester. Yeah, but through a series of dreams, kind of woke up on the third day. Well, I should probably tell that story just a little bit because that's kind of a big jump. Yeah, no, I had a series of dreams, 3 nights in a row and 3 scenes on each night, and they were the same 3 each night. So I was in a pulpit that I'd never seen before because we weren't churchgoers. I was in a living room setting, leading some sort of Young Life-y song type stuff, and then in a college lecture hall, a big stadiumed lecture hall at the front. Man, on that third morning, I literally feel like I was pushed out of the bed. I remember lying on my face, covering my face, just saying, Lord, I have no idea what you intend from this, but I'm just going to say yes. Whenever you call, I'm going to say yes.
How long had you been following Jesus at that point?
3 months, 4 months. See, I became a Christian because I saw the love of Christian community, and they welcomed me before I believed. So there was belonging before believing, a lot like infant baptism. And then I came to know that I needed a savior, but that was probably in the cycle of my journey that it was like, and I'm Lord of your life. So but that surrender was beautiful. My first big yes after that was teaching kindergartners Sunday school. I went to this little church near the college because it was the only one you could walk to, and I didn't have a car. And so they were needing people to teach Sunday school. And so I taught kindergarten Sunday school. The most amazing, if you have a new believer, put them with 5-year-olds. It's amazing because you get the wonder of the story, and the 5-year-olds really disciple you or there's this common path of discipleship, even though you're different ages. And then, I think through college, a process of discernment, knowing that, started to interact with a Presbyterian church. And as I look back on it now, I was, in my mind, I agree with this theologically. I love this system. This system is a beautiful reflection of this theology. But the truth of the matter is that there was so much chaos in my life and in my soul that I was begging for an institution that could give me some control and certainty and then I didn't have to do the hard work of figuring out that healing that needed to happen. So served Presbyterian churches from the time we were first married. Graduated from seminary, married 2 weeks later, and in Mississippi 2 weeks after that.
So that was your first experience in the South?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I went to school in Louisville, but
okay.
Most people would say that's not really in the South.
Yeah, I'll say that's questionable.
It's like Midwest light.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then, so you were in Mississippi. How did you end up at South Highland? Because you were for a time an associate pastor here.
Yeah. Well, Laurel, Mississippi is the town where that show Our Town is filmed, right? Mm-hmm. It's also the town where Sam Bowers, head of the KKK, was active in 1963. It was also the town where Fannie Lou Hamer grew up, just a mile away from Sam Bowers. Fannie Lou Hamer, big civil rights activist. But me being me and the family that I had, I was having lunch with African-American pastor. We were trying to do some choir swaps. We were, staying engaged. I remember the pastor, we're sitting at lunch at our first lunch, and toward the end, he says, "Are you ready for this?" I says, "Ready for what?" And I kind of naively said, "You mean lunch once a month?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, but," he said, "Jim, I've been knowing your people my whole life, and they're not ready for this." But, I just kind of kept blundering in. And ultimately that was not good. So there was a small little group that had a loud voice. Yeah, they made it about...
At your church, you mean?
Oh, yeah, at the church. And they, the presenting issue is usually not the issue. And so, some of it was around music and around my personal stuff. Yeah, so there was a congregational vote after all of this trauma. And there was about 70% of the church stood up and said, we're not voting. I was like, where were you all when this was going on? So by that time, there had been too much that had passed, and loaded up my 3-year-old daughter and off to my mother-in-law's attic in Birmingham. So I think it's helpful.
Shout out to Faye.
Yeah, shout out to Faye. Shout out to Faye. I wasn't doing the soul work that needed to be done to navigate that stuff. I was very much of the opinion that if you just thought about it right, if you just did it right, if you had everything neatly organized or, put in categories, if you did it right, it would be all right. If there are no errors in the bulletin, if you run the session meeting well, if it all goes according to your plan. I wasn't really tending to what are the feelings that people are having as they're experiencing change? What are some of the deeply held beliefs that I'm not paying attention to in this circumstance? Is there a story that I'm not listening to? Which is interesting because I had so many experiences cross-culturally that were kind of, God was constantly reminding me, now there's not a single way to, to do this. There's not a single way of thinking about this, that the human experience is so much broader than you could even imagine. And you're not creating enough room within your soul to incorporate that complexity. So that was kind of my part of the journey at Laurel, was that I had oversimplified it.
So you're in your mother-in-law's attic.
With a cat and a 3-year-old.
Which is where everybody wants to be.
Perfect. Well, I mean, since Faye's listening, the most ideal mother-in-law situation you could have.
I believe it.
No, it actually really was good for us. But we started worshiping at South Highland. And, I started the search process, looking for another call. Denny and Noel Reed were literally on the way out the door.
Associate pastors at
South Highland at the time. Denny, they left South Highland, and actually, Denny's toothbrush was still in the desk when I arrived. So gross. Denny, if you're listening,
shame on you.
Don't leave like that. That's just terrible, man. Stepped in to help out as an associate. Really didn't have any interest in being an associate. And the idea of doing ministry and not leading it was a little bit odd.
Especially when you've been a first chair.
Right.
Going to second, that's a difficult shift.
Right. But, when they said, well, you've never done this before. And I says, well, I'll just be the kind of the associate that I would want to hire. And that was kind of the role or the hat that I put on. What kind of associate would I want to hire? I'll do that. If I ever had a question, what would you want to do?
And so how long were you an associate here at South Highland?
We arrived in November of 2009, that spring in 10, and then by the first of the year. So 11 to 17, give you the time frame.
Right. So
about 7 years.
And then so you left that role, and what did you leave to go do?
There was some sort of natural event here in Birmingham. I can't remember if it was like a set of thunderstorms that came through or if something with the power grid was wrong, but we knew there was not going to be anybody in worship. As a matter of fact, I walked, which makes me think it was an ice event. So I walked from Homewood over the mountain to South Highland. I knew Larry was going to be preaching that day, so I was going to come, open it up. Ed was out of town. And and as expected, it was a small group that Sunday. But Larry was preaching on Moses and the burning bush. And there was a moment in that sermon where I heard God's voice saying, turn aside. We had begun to, my experience in India was a big deal because I had just finished my Doctor of Ministry. So I had all of the things. And, I thought, well, now that I've got it all. But man, that trip to India turned everything on its head in terms of how I approached discipleship.
And that was a trip you took while you were...
While I was here, yeah. Took a group of young adults to India with Cody Watson. So I had started to make transitions with men's ministries, started to make transitions with how we think about discipleship. And then I have this moment with that sermon where it says, turn aside. So really thinking, what does that mean? Like, I have an idea of what that means. It means turning aside from this ordinary pattern and trying to figure out how do we connect with people outside of the church. That was kind of the shift for me, was we got to stop figuring out how to get people in here to do the church thing, and we've got to get the people who know Jesus out there doing the Jesus thing. It's such a hard jump for people to make from coming in from the outside, coming into the church culture. So you just have to have Jesus followers that want to be like Jesus out there and not be overly concerned with how do we get them to be like us. Yeah, so that turn aside came. It's shocking. I was like, I didn't know what to do with that. So I walk home. Sonia's waiting for me at the back door. She had listened to the service on the radio, and she said, did you hear what I heard? Took a step back, and I was like, what did you hear? And she said, turn aside.
Wow.
So that afternoon, I went over to Adam Mixon, who is the pastor at Zion Spring Baptist Church, great friend. And we talked that afternoon. And Monday morning, I put a letter on Ed's desk. Gave him 4 weeks.
Senior
notice.
pastor at the time.
Yeah, pastor at the time.
Wow.
4 weeks later, I was in a brown UPS truck. That's just brutal work. What the customer sees is a guy who brings them a package and is polite. And I thought, I'll get to know people all over the city and blah, blah, blah. No, man, they are measuring every moment. You don't have time to build relationships with people in the city. So I took an insurance job, trying to give myself more time. I was working with 3 different neighborhoods, 3 little small kind of expressions of the kingdom. But COVID hit, and so we were all home, which was dreadful. Because what I loved about doing insurance claims was, connecting with all of these young people, young professionals.
You might be the first person in history to say what I loved about doing insurance claims.
Right. I loved the relationships. I mean, the boss, my supervisor was younger than I am, and he and I talked about leadership stuff all the time. As a matter of fact, the funny piece about that was he called me in for my annual review, and he says, well, you know this stuff more than I do. What would you say to you if you were me? And I said, well, Jim, we appreciate your loyalty and your faithfulness. You're fun to work with, but you really stink at doing claims. But you do it well enough that we can't fire you, but you do it poorly enough that we can't promote you to the position of manager where you really need to be. And so we just kind of have to give you a C and pat you on the back. And that's it. And he looked at me and was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed to say, but didn't know how to say. It's like, yeah, I know. So, yeah, bless his heart. He's such a good guy, Anyhow, so yeah, I mean, I'm stuck in a desk that's like, my desk at home was wedged between the door. So my shoulders were at the door frame of a closet where I kept my computer for work. So none of those discipling connections, none of that day-to-day work, just complete isolation. Cody calls me and says, hey, are you at all interested in working with Frontier Fellowship? And and honestly, talk about transitions that are different. I says, there was really no quote unquote call of God for this at all. I was like, I don't know, but I know I don't want to do this. It's not, if we heard a voice to get us to leave South Highland, there's just actually a cling of desperation to leave and come to Frontier Fellowship. Now, obviously, I have lots of, obviously it fits. Beautiful work, kind of work that I've been doing. I loved connecting with pastors and congregations, helping them understand God's vision for the nations. I have good cross-cultural skills.
And that's what Frontier Fellowship does. It's raising up indigenous church leaders in the frontier, taking the gospel to places where it doesn't currently exist or has not been heard.
That's right.
So mission work,
yes,
essentially.
Correct.
So you've been in that role for a few years.
4
years. Primarily working in India.
India and Pakistan. Started some new work in Pakistan.
Yeah. But you are now transitioning out of that work and you are beginning a new call. Can you tell us about what that new call is?
Yeah. So I've been called to be the pastor of First Presbyterian Church in Athens, Alabama.
So you are getting back into the pulpit.
Back into the pulpit.
Tell us a little bit about what that call process has been like. You have referenced 2 previous transitions, one where you almost audibly heard God speak to you, and then one where circumstances, you just almost stumbled your way into something that was still part of God's call. Which one has this been?
Well, and then there's the other transition that we talked a little bit about literally being pushed out of a church.
Oh, yeah, golly, yeah.
So it's interesting when I think about transitions, and the book, How to Walk into a Room, is such a good book about transitions. It's been a good companion during this season.
I don't know that book.
Oh, man. Fantastic. This is a lady that's a spiritual director, but she doesn't primarily write for the church. She writes for a wider audience. And it's a really great book about just she describes it as, how do you enter into a room, the hallway that you find yourself, which is between rooms, and then, exiting one room, entering into a hallway that leads to another room. So I've described, even in our story today, 3 different events. One where I was pushed out to the hall, one where I kind of grew into another room, like I was here, but kind of grew into something, then an audible coming away, like this is where you need to go. So so this is this is a hard call because I was up in Huntsville with David Kling at Covenant.
Great pastor.
Great pastor. This congregation's done great work with oral language translations that are happening in northern India. Really amazing, kind of generous contribution to that work. And so I'm talking with David about this work and about traveling to India. And he says, Jim, you've got to come pastor this church in Athens. And my first response was, man, what am I messing up with Frontier Fellowship that he wants me to get out of this and come do this? And he says, no, it's not that. They've been without a pastor. They need a good person. You'd be a good person. So I really started working through that.
How long ago was that initial conversation?
That was May.
Of this year? That
was May of this year. So this has been one of my longest hallway seasons because almost immediately after I had a conversation with the interim. Almost immediately, I contacted my executive director and said, I need some help discerning with this. And to his credit, he has a kingdom mindset and he has a prayerful approach. And I know that he's been praying for me probably more than I've prayed. Honestly, just to be real, that always felt good knowing that he was interceding. Yeah, and he helped with that discernment process. 2024, I believe that I slept in beds other than my own more than I slept in my own bed.
Because of your travel with Frontier Fellowship.
That's correct. Whether I was overseas or whether I was traveling around to churches or conferences or follow-ups, beds other than my own. And so in 2025, I said, I can't do this pace. I had cholera at that, in 2024. My health was, I wasn't sleeping right, certainly not eating right. And I said, something's got to change. But in 2025, at the beginning, I was going at a similar pace. And I realized I was yearning for those daily connections of life and work. Like, not just dropping into a congregation, having these fantastic, conversations and then walking away. Like, I wanted to be more involved in the day-to-day. I wanted more collegiality with members of a church as they were pursuing what God called them to do. And I just wasn't able to do that. I was kind of in and out. And so I realized I was compulsively scheduling travel because I was really deeply yearning more connection. And the more I traveled, the more I was disconnected, right? It kind of evolved in that way. And so that was a big part of the discernment, is like, no, your soul is not wired to be in and out. That I still have apostolic giftings, which require kind of movement toward the other and beyond what is present, but there still has to be some sort of core of relationality, rhythm, life together.
I was going to say, it's funny you say that because for as long as I've known you, which is a few years now, I've just always thought of you deeply as a churchman, but I've never known you as a churchman. Like, you've always been doing mission work, out traveling, racking up the frequent flyer stuff.
Yeah, right.
But you've always struck me as ultimately a pastor. And so when I heard about this call, I was like, that makes so much sense for what I know of Jim.
So when I was coming up in Mississippi and, coming out of seminary, Eugene Peterson was the man. And Eugene Peterson's model of pastoral ministry was you go to one place, you stay in one place, you do the long work. And I realized in this process that I was beating myself up about my transitions because I hadn't lived up to that ideal. This kind of goes back to getting it right. And I realized, no, not every pastor. There are what I would call, I hate to use the word pure, but there are pastors that is their primary and strongest gift among the fivefold gifts of ministry. And I realize I have an apostolic gifting that has a real strong pastoral component to it. But I still have, there's prophetic gifts, evangelistic gifts, teaching gifts, but they're all kind of mid, to be honest. They're all kind of mid. And that's kind of part of the apostolic gifting, right? Is that they do touch all of the other fivefold gifts of ministry.
When you say apostolic gifting, say a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Well, apostle, the root of it is sent, right? And so the apostle is always concerned about the sent nature of the church, and it's always concerned about the core of God's mission in the world. So always the question of what is next? Where is the Spirit leading us next? And you can do that from a purely apostolic, I work with apostolic leaders that are genuinely apostolic. That's their primary gifting. They can do all the other things, but they are very much what's over the next hill constantly. I just don't have that as the most. So I have a pastoral gifting with a real strong connection to the apostolic calling. Yeah, I think when we say the Nicene Creed and we get to that part of apostolic church, we're like, let's not talk about that. We don't want to talk about the church being sent.
Being sent's uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Being sent is a constant state of transition.
Yeah.
So for me, this season of discernment has really helped me reflect back on, quite possibly that I am called to be pastors for seasons to help congregations discover what their sentness is. So then I got to thinking about my experience at South Highland, and I was like, every 2 years or so, there was a different transition of what was next for this church, and that's why it was such a positive experience here. First, we did the evangelism piece, and then there was this transition after the India piece. So there were those transitions that were like, yeah, this is about the sent nature.
So transitions, in my experience, are emotionally complicated. Spiritually complicated. There's joy and excitement, but also fear and often grief. How have you experienced this transition?
Yeah, every transition is loss. Every transition is loss, and there's grief. Every grief has pain, and you have to walk through it. You have to walk through pain, period. Actually, I think this is probably one of the most important things that I've been learning. People don't fear change at all. They fear the pain that comes with loss. And if you're emotionally stunted like I am, you just have so many weird coping mechanisms for pain that just need healing. And I think if we can help people heal around some of their deepest areas of pain, change isn't such a big deal for them anymore. But man, the people that are kicking and screaming about change, it's not the change. I know the change is going to involve pain, and I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with my feelings or my complicated emotions or the spiritual angst that's around change. I don't know how to do that in a healthy way. So I'm going to avoid change because it's really avoiding the pain of loss.
So what does that look like for you as you make this transition into a new pastorate?
So for me, it's been about embracing what hurts and what's broken and what God has redeemed. I knew in my mind that God redeems a whole person. Absolutely.
What do you mean by a whole person?
Like all of their feelings, all of their body, all of their thought, all of their relationships, all of their gifts, all of their sins, all of this is redeemed. And I would have said that, if I wrote my ordination exam about redemption, I would have talked about the redemption of the whole person. There's no aspect of Christ's sanctifying and loving work that doesn't apply to the whole person, whatever circumstance they find themselves in. But there was a point this summer where I realized you really thought Jesus just redeemed the cleaned up version of you. I'm walking alone on a trail on the Appalachian Trail by myself. Didn't see anybody out there for days. And the image of the Toy Story came to me. Remember Toy Story 2, I think it is, where Woody gets bought by a collector, and the collector kind of sews him all up and paints new eyebrows on him and dramatically paints over Andy on Woody's foot, puts him in a box. And God was just saying to me, that's not redemption. Redemption for Woody is being with the person who loves him. And God was just saying, you know what? You're mine. Your stitches are broke. There are things about you but what's redemptive is you're in my possession as my beloved. That's what's redemption. And so for me, I was like, so the big question for me then came, well, what does it mean to go into this next call? What does it look like? And God was just very clearly saying, your redeemed self, the mess of it. Like this particular congregation needs the expression of my love poured through this imperfect person, not to achieve anything or to make a name for myself or to accomplish something. The work is real. This you in your redeemed self is who you need, but also the converse is also true. I have more soul work to do on you, and these are the people that I want you to walk with to do that soul work. So it's really, there's part of me that it feels so selfish and it feels like there's no ambition in it, which is a weird spot for me to be in. It really is a strange spot. But to think, when I think about the people at First Athens, I realize, yeah, these are the people that are going to, this is my soul's journey needs this particular place and these particular people at this particular time. Like God's work is going to happen in this, most perfectly in this spot. And that the work is not preaching, teaching, pastoral care, leading the church's mission, engaging with community, although it is. But for the first time, I'm starting to think of, this is the work of my soul and their souls.
Well, what a gift that the Lord often works this way, where what you need for your continued sanctification is what they need for their continued sanctification. They being First Pres Athens in that congregation. And that's a really beautiful picture of what pastoral ministry can be. So you're making this major transition. You're in your 50s. 55. So mid-50s, solidly.
The other part of this is that, I'm going to be dead soon.
Yeah.
I mean, even if the Lord gives me another third of life, that's a huge blessing, but it might not happen.
Right. So what would you say to someone who's listening, who is also facing some sort of transition, whether they know exactly what that's going to be or whether they just are having these initial stirrings that there's some sort of change on the horizon, but then in particular, making a major vocational change in your 50s? That tends to be the time when people are least likely to make a major change like that. They're settling down, retirement's drawing near, at least it's on the horizon, visible. So what would you say to someone sitting down with you, processing some of the things together? How have you thought about them?
Well, the first thing I would say is that everybody's going through transition on some level. Every human being goes through some sort of significant event that requires significant change every 18 months. And some of those are positive, right? A new baby comes into the home, a marriage, a move, a death, broken relationship. Everybody, about every 18 months, something significant shifts for them. So I think the first thing I would say to somebody that's going through transition is, well, yeah, of course. This isn't an abnormal thing in life. This is a normal part of life. Most of our transitions are at a pace that we can incorporate easily. But some of those transitions are more difficult to incorporate into our being. So I think that's what I would say to everybody is be patient with the person that's in front of you. We're not really sure how whatever they're going through is affecting them. But also to be patient with yourself in the process of transition. I think for older people, I would say be thankful and be fearless. Like they need the space and time to think, but that's more of a gratitude of look at all of the transitions you've been through and where you currently are. Be grateful for that, but then be absolutely fearless about jumping, about making a change that maybe satisfies your heart's deepest longings. Because by the time you get to my age, I would say it's a good season to unload yourself of the priorities of the early parts of life, which are building a family, building competence in your work, establishing yourself and your giftings within the realm of this life. But at this point, you can start to let all that go. My mom's a great example of that, by the way. She's been doing the Swedish death cleanse. She has congestive heart failure. Who knows how long she'll make it. But for the last 3 years, she's been doing the Swedish death cleanse.
So tell us, what is the Swedish death cleanse?
Well, basically, I think it comes out of Swedish culture. Basically, people that are older start detaching themselves from their possessions. The early parts of life are about acquiring things. Necessarily. That's not a bad part of life. It's a great part of life. But yeah, when you get to a certain age, it's like, I want you to have this clock before I die, so I can have the pleasure of you enjoying something that was important to me. I don't want all of this clutter in my life. I want to be gone with this, but things that are truly meaningful, I want to see people that I love enjoy them. And so she's giving away stuff.
And there's a way to do that emotionally and spiritually as well, which I think your age, I'm obviously projecting here a little bit.
That's good, yeah.
But your age and some of the senior saints, as we call them, that I have the privilege of pastoring and walking with, there's a real richness to that season that I'm actually really looking forward to in some sense.
Yeah, I think that's the genius of what people that are older are missing about what they need to communicate to younger generations, is that this season of letting go, it's not your season, but it is something to look forward to. So that when it starts to happen to you in expected and unexpected ways, you start to say, I watched my father do this. I watched my mother do this, or I watched older people in the church do this and do it well. And so this is the season that I find myself. So it's not so disorienting.
What have you had to let go of as you approach this transition?
The thoughts of competence, of wanting to get it right, appearances. What do people think of me? Do they think I'm capable? That's a huge temptation with starting in a new community, by the way. You want to advice giving. That's an amazing, I need to put that to the street. Man, you really want to rush in there with advice. And transitioning to a new church, that's a huge temptation. Because they've been without a pastor, so they are looking for some guidance. Really, they're not looking for guidance. They're looking for what Jesus wants for them next. I need to point them to a person, not to look at what I know. That temptation to advice giving is huge for me. I'd like to say I could put that to the street. That's probably more like shedding weight than it is just taking a physical thing to the street. It's got to be something that I'm constantly aware of. And yeah, I think those are some things I'm trying to shed.
What are you personally praying for as you step into this new call for yourself, for your new church, and how can we join you in those prayers?
It's fascinating you say that. Someone asked me a different question, but similar. Where are you experiencing God right now in this transition? Truthfully, it's mostly in writing and in poetry. So when I came up, I had dyslexia, still have dyslexia to some degree, I guess. So I was constantly told, like my high school guidance counselor said to me, you need to go in the trades. You're not suited for college. You'll never be able to do any of this. And that was especially true around everything that I wrote. And so for me, the practice of writing and writing poetry, and that's really where I've been sensing. So poetry is this place of prayer that just allows your soul to be open. And so it's not a prayer request. So really the prayer request is my soul will be more courageously open to what God is doing instead of managing it, right? That's a good prayer. I would be grateful for that. Folks at South Highland, so much love here. I feel like that is something that they would want for me.
You are beloved by this congregation. When I came on staff, I can't tell you how many times I heard the question, have you met Jim yet? Have you met Jim?
Oh my gosh.
And then we finally did meet, and I'm so glad we did.
I'm so sorry.
No,
I'm so sorry.
I've really come to cherish our friendship, and I'm excited to see you step into this new call and to continue to consider you a colleague in ministry.
Absolutely. I've been so grateful. I've kind of, because of all of those things, stayed away from, like, stayed out of it and just let you come into your own. But I tell you, just the biggest fans of you and your family and what God's doing here at South Highland. As a matter of fact, I couldn't have led this church's transition the way that you and Abby have led this church's transition. I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Thank you for saying that. Praise God.
Yeah. Thank God for it.
Well, thanks for your time this morning.
I loved it.
And look forward to seeing what the Lord does through this call.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Thanks.
You've been listening to Common Life. To learn more about this podcast or our church, visit us at southhighland.org. We worship together every Sunday in downtown Birmingham, and we would love to have you join us. As always, thank you to Jeremy Moore for providing our theme music. You can find more of Jeremy's music on Spotify or wherever you listen to music. See you next time.